If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What is the creepiest and most unexplainable paranormal experience you've ever had? When I was around 12, my mother had to go out of town for a bit and she left me home alone for a few days. We lived close to relatives, so it wasn't a big deal back then. She refused to give me a mobile phone because she figured she could just call me on the landline if anything came up. She told me the date when she'd be back, and that was that. The date arrives and I hear my mom knocking on the door downstairs, calling my name. My dog, who loved her, got excited when she heard her voice and ran down ahead to greet her. She got to the door, freaked the hell out, and ran back upstairs to me. I refused to go down and open the door. The phone started ringing and the knocking stopped. I picked up the phone to hear my mom say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I have to stay one more day here. I'll head home tomorrow." Lived in an old 2-bedroom, 3-story walk-up for a time in my early 20s in Toronto. A few days after moving in, my roommate Mike chides me in the morning for banging on the wall that separated our bedrooms and pacing back and forth across the apartment at night. We just agreed he must have been dreaming, or it was sounds from other apartments, as I had done no such thing. We agreed that it must have been nothing and left it at that, but this became a regular nightly occurrence. Shortly thereafter, I started noticing at certain times in my own bedroom the cloying smell of cheap women's perfume mixed with a damp, musty smell. Imagine an old person's clothes left on a damp, musty basement floor near a litter box that wasn't being changed often enough, and you get the idea. What made it even weirder is that I would be filled with a sudden horrible sense of foreboding a few moments before the smell would begin. Mike flaked out and left only 4 months into our 1-year lease, which meant I was left footing the rent for the entire place until I could find another roommate. I had decided to try and sleep in his bedroom shortly after he moved to see if things would get better. The very first night I slept in his former room, I had an incredibly detailed and realistic nightmare of myself standing in the dimly lit bathroom of the apartment and cutting my own face with a large shard of glass while staring into the broken bathroom mirror. It was only broken in the dream. Soon after that, I started to hear the loud bangs at night and the flushing of the toilet in the bathroom. Several times the hot water in the bathtub turned on full blast in the middle of the night. One of the freakier things that happened not too long before I moved is the time I was woken up by the TV blaring Poltergeist on City TV at about 2 in the morning. At the time, that channel would always play movies late at night, but the fact that the one time my analog TV, turn a knob to change the channel or the volume, pull a knob to turn it on, turned on by itself at full blast, was the time a movie like Poltergeist was playing. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister, and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie, would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6 years old, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake my sister up, but she rolled over to go back to sleep. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog, because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke my sister up and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, nothing was there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or other demon in our room. We know we aren't crazy because the dog saw it too. I work as a field biologist, and this last summer I had what I would call my closest experience with the paranormal. We would drive around on ATVs all night with spotlights looking for prairie chickens. One night my boss and I were working together, our coworkers were at another site about 5 miles away, and we'd made plans to meet up if either of our groups finished up in our respective areas. Anyways, it's about 4 o'clock in the morning, very dark out, and my boss and I both noticed the grass on a hilltop opposite us was illuminated, as though someone had parked their truck on the other side and turned their brights on, lighting up their side of the hill. It was coming from the direction and general distance our trucks were from us, so my boss and I decided to head that way, assuming our coworkers were meeting up with us. We drive the tilde half a mile to the hilltop. When we finally crest, all we see are the reflectors of our parked trucks in the distance. No lights, no vehicles, nobody nearby. Mind you, we were working in incredibly remote areas in Wyoming. The roads in and out were treacherous. There's no possible way someone snuck a truck in and out to spook us without us seeing them. This was prairie, we could see everything around us for miles. We saw that light, but now it was nowhere to be seen. Anyways, that was weird. This happened when I was 17. When I was still living at my childhood home, I was sneaking out late at night to meet some friends. I went through the back door of the house, and as I turned to face the door, I could just feel somebody watching me. I thought I was busted. I turned to look at who had caught me, and saw a totally monochrome figure. The hair was completely black, like blacker than black. Her face was like a static washed over white/gray, and she was wearing a dress that was in between the two colors. No facial features. Just the silhouette of a young girl facing me. I reached for the door as fast as I could, and when I went to shut it, it closed very quickly on me. I bolted through my yard and onto the street and couldn't shake the feeling I was being followed. I stayed at my friend's that night. Soon after this happened, I was up late with my mom watching a movie. My dad had just passed away. We finish our movie up and say goodnight after turning the TV, stereo receiver, and DVD player all with their own remotes. After a short amount of time in bed, I am jarred awake by the sound of static with the speakers cranked up and the TV on with no input. My mom and I meet in the hallway, surprised to see that we had both been awoken to an empty house. A few years ago, when I was 23-ish and graduated from college, I finally told my family about the first occurrence. Before I am able to finish my description of the ghost, she finishes for me, telling me that her and her friend used to see a little girl in our backyard playing in a sundress. She said that she looked maybe 12. Our neighbor, who was the original owner, shared a story with us about the family that originally bought the house after it was built. It was a young family whose daughter passed away from leukemia. She would have been about the right age. Looking back, the girl wasn't scary or harmful. My sister had the same impression. To this day, I believe what we saw and haven't seen anything like it ever since. I was a rookie cop when my brother committed suicide. He was one of my older siblings, but we were very close. He died in another state, and I had a lot of guilt then about not recognizing the signs. His remains were in bad shape by the time he was discovered, so it was a closed coffin service. About a week after he died, I was back at work one night, and my partner and I see a pimp pistol whipping one of his girls. I jump out and the pimp sees me and the foot chase was on. I was running after him, gun in hand, and he cuts through a narrow corridor under a building that leads to a courtyard in the middle. Right before I reach the courtyard, I hear "It's okay" in my dead brother's voice. I hit the courtyard and the guy is against the side pointing a gun at my head, and squeezes the trigger twice. I froze for a millisecond and then started beating him in the head with my revolver. Till this day, I don't know why I didn't just shoot him, cuff him and walk him back to the street and find my partner. I tell my partner about him squeezing the trigger, but not the voice I heard. We unload the gun, .32 revolver, right there, and 2 bullets have strike marks on them. Take the gun to the lab for testing. Tell the tech the story. He puts the 2 bullets with strike marks back in and shoots into the test tank. Both bullets fired. I was running on the trails at the Nathan Hale homestead, 18th century farmhouse and property of a Revolutionary War hero, in CT, which is only about a 10-minute drive from my grandmother's lake house. I could not find a map of the trails anywhere online, and there didn't seem to be any signage at the place, just a bunch of random mountain bike trails in the woods. I was only going to run 4 miles, so I estimated that I would run for about 30 minutes, using my watch to keep myself on track. So I ran around the trails for a while and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. It was about 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and the only sounds were the distant hums of Route 31, birds chirping, and the occasional squirrel or deer that scampered off whenever I came near. The trail seemed to wind around a lot, and, if not for my better than average directional skills, humble brag, I could have easily gotten lost. About 20 minutes in, I saw something strange about 50 meters off, a finely polished, light-colored wooden coffin. I was a little weirded out to say the least and waited until I got closer for a better look. I rounded a corner where several old tree stumps blocked my view, only to find that the coffin had disappeared. Where it should have been was a clump of ferns. Odd. I turned around shortly thereafter and made my way back to my car. I was maybe a half mile out when I heard a very distinctive knocking on a nearby tree to the rhythm of shave and a haircut. Tock tock tee tock tock, except no 2 bits. I was a little spooked but chalked it up to be a woodpecker or something. However, not 30 seconds later, there it was on a completely different tree up ahead somewhere, tock tock tee tock tock. I picked up the pace. The trail widened a little and I could see way ahead the entrance to the parking lot where my car was. There it was again, on a tree seemingly right next to me. Tock tock tee tock tock. I truly started freaking out and started to book it back to the lot. I was nearing the opening when time seemed to slow down. All of a sudden it felt like the temperature dropped about 20 degrees, the birds stopped singing, and my simple Timex watch started to malfunction, making all sorts of beeping noises and the numbers glitching on the screen. The beat sounded impossibly loud this time, like it was hacked into every surrounding tree with a hand axe. Tock tock tee tock tock. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over me as I anticipated hearing the 2 bits refrain, and perhaps worse. I burst into the parking lot and everything went back to normal. The temperature was back in the mid-70s and birds were chirping away. I looked at my watch, only to discover that it had gone completely blank. I stood there and stared at it until it flashed 12 o'clock Monday 1.01, January 1st. My watch had reset itself. It had never done this before. I got into the car and started the engine. The clock on the radio display read 12 o'clock. That couldn't be right, it should have been around 9:30 or 9:45 at the latest. I put her in reverse and backed up to where I could clearly make my way out to the main road. However, as I was about to throw the car into drive as it sat there, I heard a sharp rapping sound on the back window, like someone hitting it with their knuckles. Tuck tuck. There was no one else in the parking lot when I had finished my run, no cars, no nothing. I didn't dare look back and hightailed it back to my grandmother's house. I have no idea what could have caused this series of events and still cannot explain it to this day. Middle of the night, sleeping. I hear a sound like someone is taking a paperclip from my desk and throwing it against the wall and it bounces across the desk. I wake up to this noise, turn on the light right by my bed as I sit up. I look over and see nothing. Weird. As I'm ready to lay back down, my 20-pound steel gumball machine falls from the shelf over my bed directly onto my pillow where my head was not 30 seconds earlier. I flip out and scramble out of my bed as I'm totally taken by surprise. As I stand up, I feel something under my feet. A paperclip. I put the murderous gumball machine on the floor, the paperclip back on my desk and crawl into the safety of my comforter. Nothing like that happened again. I was working at a summer camp as night custodial and security. Hours are 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Because of this, I get really used to being alone for long hours of time and nighttime weirdness. Everything is heightened. At night. Noises spook you even if you know what they are, shadows are much spookier, silence is much more ominous. After 3 months on the job, I'm pretty well inundated to all that though. So when I begin to experience some actual paranormal stuff, I'm a little unnerved. Saw a humanoid shadow cross the road a large distance away in broad daylight during my day off. Chalked it up to poor vision, but it with flash-like speed and soundlessly. A group of friends set up a thermal cam in the chapel and got hits of cold spots around 3 a.m. Would hear noises with no discernible sources from certain areas of my office building. Kitchen would always have doors opening and closing. The hands down creepiest moment though was toward the end of summer. 5 a.m. twilight and I'm starting my end shift routine of patrolling on a golf cart. I drive up to the crossroads of one of the gym buildings and begin to go up and unlock the doors so campers can get in during the day. Before I can do that, however, I see a figure. It's not 20 feet away from me and it's looking at me. How do I describe it? Imagine Shadow Link with no eyes and a vague formlessness. Now make it child-sized with long hair. I assume it's a camper out of bed before morning wake-up call. As I begin driving the cart to it, the figure moves like nothing I've ever seen. Faster than I can really track, and with no noise at all it runs into the gym. I mean into the wall of the gym building. Again, thinking perhaps I'm seeing things and assuming it's a camper, I drive to the other side of the building to intercept it. Perhaps it ran behind the gym. Of course I arrive to see nothing at all. I then start getting an uncomfortable feeling. Like when you stand in a room with someone who kinda scares you. I say fuck my routine, finish up quick and go to bed. Didn't even punch my card, just figured it out the next day. I lived in a haunted apartment. It was 2 rooms, but one of the rooms was locked, and I didn't have the key. So I only had one small room as kitchen, dining room and bedroom, and a screened-in porch. There were 2 especially freaky events. One night, my girlfriend slept over, and she woke up in the middle of the night and said she saw the bathroom door open and a shadowy figure standing in the bathroom, staring at her. The bathroom was right across from the locked room. Another time, I was jerked awake by the fire alarm going off, just blaring, but when I went to unplug it the alarm stopped and no other alarm in the building was going off. A lot of the things that happened could have been just my neighbors, but the way they happened was, well, weird. I would hear knocking, it sounded like someone tapping a spoon on a counter, coming from the downstairs apartment. It could have been my neighbor, but I'm not sure why she would do that every couple of minutes for hours on end, or in the middle of the night. I would also hear knocking on the walls, it sounded like someone tapping their way up the wall, like they were looking for a stud. I would also hear this weird moaning/howling that I couldn't trace the source of. Again, could have been a neighbor's dog, but it didn't sound like it was coming from her apartment. The apartment across from me had 3 tenants in a year, I think because it was just as or more haunted than mine. I had, I think, a unique way of coping. I named the ghost Pete, after a previous tenant's mail I would get from time to time, and I tried talking to him, basically treating him like a roommate I wasn't friends with. My girlfriend was much more freaked out by the situation than me and basically stopped coming over after a few months, so I wasn't there much anyway. When I felt that talking to Pete made the atmosphere of the whole place much more friendly. I also left out a sheet of paper with Pete's notes written on it, and told him if he had any problems, just write them down. I still don't know if I quite believe in ghosts, though I find the supernatural fascinating, but that experience did push me closer to the science doesn't know everything about the universe camp. When I was a young teenager, my father and my stepmother had gotten married. This forced me and my little brother to move into her home and share the same bedroom for quite some time. 3 weeks before we moved in, my stepmother's mom had died where I slept for most of my childhood. The spooky part happens one night when I got off of my computer and I was going to bed. I had laid there for maybe 10 minutes when I started hearing scratching at my closet door. I figured it was a mouse and went to sleep. I go to get dressed in the morning and open my closet door to see very, very long scratches down the inside of the door. Like deep scratches. It wasn't in one area, it was wavy from the top of the door to the bottom. Both hands. 10 lines. That's the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I used to be in the military and the training camp bunk that we lived in was said to be haunted. Occasionally, our stuff would go missing and reappear in weird places, like under our bed, or inside a bag that we had zipped up and stuff. No big deal, right? I mean, human error and all. Then came the instance that freaked everyone out. It was one night after lights out and my friend was on his phone texting his girlfriend. Most of us were drifting off to sleep, and were lying on our beds etc. Suddenly, he heard the shuffling of feet from the corridor, so thinking that it was our sergeant, he quickly hid his phone under his pillow, rolled over on his side and pretended to sleep. Till this day, what happens next chills me to the bone. While he pretended to sleep, he heard someone right behind him, at the other side of his bed going, "Don't worry, you can continue to pretend sleep." I would dismiss this as a figment of his imagination, except about 5 other people around him heard it as well, including me. Creepier still, there was no one there, and it was the voice of a little girl that said it. For reference, our training camp was in the middle of an island, and was set up away from the main admin blocks. The island has been closed by the government for army training purposes for the past 15 years, so there were definitely no civilians around, let alone kids. To make matters freakier, when we came back from our weekend home leave, there was a bunch of female hair on his bed, neatly bundled up, long and jet black. Under his pillow was a note, "Remember me?" Now, as I said, we were in the middle of a forest, in the middle of an island. And at that point in time, there were no female recruits, personnel on the island. Our bunks were locked up for the weekend and the duty sergeant had no idea that the incident happened. We never spoke about it after that night. Still chills me to the bone thinking about it. When I was 10, I was at my best friend, Tyler's house. His family lived in a very nice house on a mountain in Georgia. Tyler always told me about the scary stuff happening at his house. Like how he would see eyes, his TV would turn off while watching it, you would hear drilling sounds and metal banging sounds and doors opening up, all the classic ghost stuff. I never believed him until this one time. We were in his hot tub together for like an hour when suddenly I feel the most overwhelming feeling to get out. At that exact moment, Tyler looks at me and says, "We need to get out now." And there was fear in his voice. We jump out and dry off and go inside pretty fast. As we go in, Tyler locks the door and tries to open it to be sure, it was locked. So we start going toward the big movie area that's near the back door to watch Napoleon Dynamite. When out of nowhere, we're both hit by that fear again, we smell what smelled like a rotting animal, his DVD rack falls over and all the movies fly off and at the same time and then the back door flies open. Needless to say, we hauled ass upstairs to his other movie room and made a fort out beanbags and chairs to defend ourselves from the paranormal enemy. From that moment on, I believed in ghosts. And that's not the only thing that's happened at Tyler's house. I'd never been too sure whether or not I believed in ghosts and all that paranormal stuff, until I was about 12 when my family had an experience that for the first time made me realize there are things in this world that truly cannot be explained. It was my aunt's wedding, and although it was a beautiful and happy day, everyone's hearts hung a little heavy since my grandfather had passed away several months before. He had been the backbone of my family and had loved his children deeply. It had been one of his dreams to see his youngest daughter, my aunt, married. During the months since his death, my grandmother had begun the process of moving, since their house was big, and now that she lived alone, so much space made her feel lonely. The love between my grandparents is a story all in itself, and my grandmother felt very guilty about leaving their first home where they had raised my family. It was a place full of their memories, and had seen my grandfather out to the end, where he had died of a heart attack, in his signature spot watching golf on his favorite couch. Meanwhile, the day of the wedding everything was going great and everyone was mingling and drinking and going about normal party festivities. Sometime during the reception, my grandmother was approached by a woman who was not known by any of my immediate family, and was later assumed to be a random friend or plus one. This woman marched up, looked my grandmother dead in the eyes and said, "He doesn't want you to feel any guilt about moving, but he wants you to keep the couch." And then she walked away. To this day my grandmother gets chills when anyone mentions this story, and I still will never have any idea how that woman knew what she did. Shit really makes you wonder. When I was a kid, my brother and I would get stuck with babysitting the neighbor's kid. His name was Alex. Alex was really fond of my Lego set that I had in the corner of my room facing the window. He would play for hours, staying preoccupied, while my brother and I would play video games in the living room. So one night, when I fell asleep on the couch, while babysitting, my brother came to me and said, "Alex is under your bed and shaking." I asked, "What's wrong with him?" My brother told me to follow him into the room and try to talk him back out from under the bed. I go inside to find him on the verge of tears as he was trembling profusely under my bed. I asked Alex, "What's wrong? Why are you under there?" Alex whimpered, "It," while looking at my sliding closet. As I walked toward the bed in order to help him out, he ran all the way back over to his house and waited on his front steps until his parents got home. Now, my parents were out to dinner with his, and he explained the whole story in detail to both his parents and mine. His explanation sent shivers down my spine when my brother and I left the house to meet up with his parents and find out what happened. My mom told me that Alex was playing with my Legos and hear a slight murmur from my closet, something that resembled a faint vocalization of, "Come here." He said that he looked behind him and noticed the closet had a slight opening with light peering in from my lamp. He stared at the crack until he saw an eyelid open. He told us that there was a man in my closet. Alex then hid under my bed after he gave out a slight yelp, which attracted my brother's attention. My family rushes back into my house and into my room. In horror, we find my closet door rocked open. My window had been left open, when it was previously closed, and a few things knocked over which had not been touched previously. We still don't know what force we were reckoning after that evening. Thank God nothing more severe happened. When I was growing up, my family moved to a cul-de-sac when I was around 8 and my brother was in the ballpark of 9. We immediately befriended 2 girls who lived next door to us who were basically our exact same age, and we hung out with them every day. We would frequently go down to a bike path located behind the circle of houses that occupied our street to ride around on our skateboards, walk to the nearby shopping center it eventually led to. It was very long, and basically just hang out. The bike path went through the woods and went in both directions for a long time, and we would often wander into the woods and play in the creek and catch crawfish and frogs and all that huckleberry fin kind of stuff. Well, the first or second week we lived there, my brother and I and these 2 girls were playing around in the creek a good ways down from our house, and we went exploring into a short sewage pipe. It was barely 20 feet in total, and you could easily see both ends, which drained into a collection of large rocks. Well, after we had sufficiently crawled around in this sketchy rainwater runoff pipe, we started climbing up the rocks to leave. My brother noticed something in the rocks and picked it up to discover that it was a small, wallet-sized, and relatively recent portrait of himself that had been taken at our school for the yearbook the prior year. It had signs of aging and water damage, and seemed to have been there for a while. I think our initial reaction was to laugh at my brother for looking goofy or something, but looking back I can't believe I didn't see how sinister it seemed. Kept going back for a long time, and it was not the last creepy thing to happen on that bike path or in that neighborhood. When I was probably 8 years old, I was playing with a Ouija board with my older sister, Tilda 12 probably, and our dad's girlfriend's son, who was maybe my sister's age/slightly older. My sister and I both recall the same story, so it wasn't just my imagination playing tricks on me. We had the board on the bed and were trying to contact some spirits, basic Ouija stuff, so we were all chanting, "Contact us, contact us, contact us" over and over. Well, it was shortly after Halloween that this happened, so we had a bucket of candy on the dresser across from the bed. It wasn't near the edge, no one was near it, there was no open window to create a draft or anything like that. Either way, it was still a full and heavy bucket. Right at the exact same moment, the lights flickered off so it was pitch black, and the bucket of candy just tipped right off the dresser. Again, all 3 of us were sitting on the bed nowhere near the dresser, and I had a view of everyone, so no one was around to do it. I ran screaming bloody murder out of that room to find my dad, accusing him of turning off the lights from the breaker, but he had no clue what I was talking about. Still freaks me out to this day. I just can't think of an explanation for it. I'd seen weird stuff before, like my deceased grandfather standing in a doorway appearing alive, Well, happy and dressed in a very snazzy white suite. But I would just blink and whatever ghost I saw would be gone. I would just chalk it up to a momentary brain fart and move along. One night in 2005 though, when I was 18, I was chatting with some friends on AOL Instant Messenger. Remember those days? I told them I'd BRB and went out the back door to get my CD collection out of my car. Remember those days? It was around midnight with clear skies and a near full moon and good illumination. I wasn't the least bit scared or nervous because I had done this literally 100 times before. My mind wasn't on anything the least bit supernatural. After I grabbed my CD case, I turned around to head back in when I saw her standing there near the garage at the front corner of my house. She was about 35, attractive brunette with light blue eyes wearing an 80s era peach-colored nightgown. Her body was facing away from the house and she had to crane her neck at an uncomfortable angle to watch me. She kept playing with her run-of-the-mill crucifix necklace. She was giving me this maternal admonishing look, like when a child disappoints its mother. If it wasn't for this slight, otherworldly glow to her, I would have thought she was a crazy neighbor. I thought, I'm seeing shit. I'll just blink and she won't be there anymore. Wrong. She was still there, eyes fixed on me, playing with that necklace. I walked to the edge of our property line, about 12 feet away from her and slowly made my way back to the back door. She never changed the orientation of her body, she just rotated her head like a sentry gun to keep me in her sights. She followed me with her eyes until I ducked behind the back corner of my house. When I got to my back door, I locked it up, shut the curtains and proceeded to tell my AIM buddies all about what I had just seen, adrenaline pumping through my veins to the point it was difficult to type. I don't believe in ghosts, but I've never had a 30 seconds hallucination before or since either. I can't explain her away. This happened to my sister's friend but involved the house I grew up in. The only reason I believe this is BC my mom told me. My mom doesn't lie. Like I'm sure she tells small fibs like, yes that dress looks good on you. But she doesn't make things up. She told me a few times how she has seen an old man in our house. Not only is he old, but he is burnt up. His skin is melted. She says he looks at her and kind of disappears into the cabinets. My brother has also seen him. One night I was reading in the living room. My sister and friend were in her room, my parents in theirs. This happened 13 years ago when I was 19. I heard a blood-curdling scream. My parents opened their door, I got up from the living room and we all went to my sister's room. My sister's friend was in my sister's lap, sobbing. She was hysterical. My dad, thinking it was some teen girl bullcrap, went right back to his room. My mom went in my sister's room and shut the door. I went to the kitchen to make a snack. About a half hour later, my sister, her friend and my mom came out my sister's room. My sister's friend's face was red and swollen. She had her backpack in her and my sister left. I guess my sister took her home. My mom came in the kitchen and I asked what happened. My sister's friend was reading a magazine on the edge of my sister's bed. She happened to look up down the hall. My sister's door was open, and that's when she said she saw an old man, half crawling, half dragging both legs, coming down the hallway. She said his face was melted and his eyes were black. She never came over again. I have yet to see this man but have had creepy things happen in that house. And sometimes when I walk into an empty room, it smells as if a match was just lit. Not me, but it's still a pretty good story. So my mom and my mom's cousin were the same age, went to school together, and sometimes were in the same class. Well, they both had a class together where my mom's cousin would constantly fall asleep in. It was an ongoing thing where the teacher would find him falling asleep and would get right into his face and yell at him to wake up. Around 30 years later, my mom's cousin comes to our house one day and told us that he fell asleep at the wheel last night and what woke him up was a dream he had of the teacher yelling at him to wake up. He told us that she practically saved his life, because when he woke up there was car parked that he would have hit going 60 miles per hour. So the next day he feels obligated to go talk to her and tell her what happened and catch up since they haven't seen each other in 30 years. He goes to his old school to see if she still works there. When he gets there and asks for her, the woman tells him that she died tragically last night in a car accident. Apparently she fell asleep while driving. My girlfriend and I lived in a small apartment in Quincy, Massachusetts in the mid-90s. We had 3 cats. On night we were sitting in the living room with the cats who were laying around as usual. When all at once, all 3 cats jumped to attention simultaneously. Their eyes were fixed to a specific point in space in the middle of the room. Since all 3 were in different spots in the room, you could triangulate where they were looking and track its movement. The cats' heads moved in unison. I got up and tried to see what they were looking at, but all I saw was empty space. The cat slowly tracked whatever it was to a wall adjacent to the kitchen. All three cats then ran into the kitchen. I followed. Whatever it is must have disappeared. When I got around to the kitchen, all three cats were looking in different directions, all still very alert. They kept scanning the living room and kitchen quite some time afterward. My girlfriend and I never saw anything. I still don't know what it was and I'm a skeptic by nature. Thinking about it still gives me chills. There's been a couple, but the most unsettling was about 7 years ago. I had the house to myself for the weekend and let the dog out the back to pee pretty late in the night. I'd gone out with her to have a look at the stars and moon, seeing as it was clear for once, pretty rare in Wales. A few minutes later I hear low growling noise. It's the dog. She was on the patio, with a defensive stance and growling up at the roof, which was strange enough seeing as I'd never heard her growl in years. I look up where she's looking and the best way to describe it would be as a large but skinny creature. It looked like a human from the silhouette I could see, but hunched on all fours, a large bulbous head maybe twice the size of a man's and limbs that seemed to have an extra joint or very long hands. It walked from one end of the roof to the other and I got the distinct impression that it was looking at me. I pretty much shat myself, dragged the dog inside and locked the doors and windows. The dog insisted on staying in my room that night, and she would lift her head up anytime there was an odd scratching noise from the attic. Never saw anything like that again after that night. Dog went back to never staying in my room and all was well. It just creeped me out something fierce, especially since it looked so solid, like an actual thing and not a ghost or whatever. I've only ever told this to close friends because I'm always told it's just active imagination or that I'm crazy, but on mobile, so please forgive the formatting. Back when I was around 7 years old I had a walk-in closet that faced directly in front of my bed. One night as I was going to sleep I see a light coming from the closet. So I assume I just left the light on since I used to always change for bed in the closet. I had weird habits as a kid. As I was getting up from the bed the door slowly cracked open. I decide to nope the fuck out to underneath my safety sheets. And then I waited, and waited, and waited. Finally I gathered up enough courage to peek out from the safety sheets. And to this day I still can't find a word or idea that comes close to what I felt. I'll try to explain it though. Basically imagine being so scared that you can't move but you don't know why, just sheer terror down your back, but at the same time you're overwhelmed with the greatest sense of love, peace, and hope to the point you want to uncontrollably cry from pure happiness and ecstasy. That's what I felt when I saw her. It was a woman that was dressed in a wedding gown with a braided band around her head. She was overflowing with a silver aura. Her eyes had this burning intensity but were warm and gentle. She then spoke and said, "My name, come with me." The voice was like the most beautifully terrifying thing in the world. It was like someone incarnated the act of a rattlesnake lunging for the kill into a voice. I just stared at her, and slowly the silver aura in her faded away. I ended up crying all night and into the morning. I was actually really dehydrated after that. But the thing that scares me more than ever is that ever since that is every now and then I'll hear that voice calling my name out of nowhere. The encounter also saddens me because the experience was so intense that everything else in life seems dull compared to it. I've tried looking into whatever it was but I've never found anything similar to my experience. If anybody knows of anything similar, please let me know. I woke up one night out of a dead sleep to someone standing over my bed looking down at me. When I looked up at him he lurched back. I was dead tired and exhausted, and I never wake up in the night. I blinked really hard and couldn't believe what I just saw, and then there he was looking down at me again. He stepped back again, and I decided to jump up and chase him out. He moved really fluidly and oddly and was out the door just before I could get to him, and I slammed the door. I was sleeping in the front room of a ground floor apartment. I didn't get a good look at him, but he was tan with a sullen face and an oversized long black shirt. After thoroughly being freaked out, I decided to look around the rest of the apartment. Nobody else was around, but I went to the back door and turned on the back porch light and looked through the nearby window, and he was staring back at me inches away with just the glass between us. I banged on the back door, then grabbed a broomstick and called the cops. They came and figured he was looking for car keys to a nearby unlocked car and talked to me about it. The strangest thing was the way he moved, just too fluid. Also, if he was just a burglar, he was stupid because my keys and wallet with over $200 was sitting on a table between the door and where I was sleeping. Also, why after me chasing him would he go around to the back door? When I was about 10 years old, I was sleeping over my cousin's house. After a long night of video games and movies in his room, it was really late and we decided to head to his kitchen to get something to drink. It was very dark in his house as his parents had long fallen asleep, and his bedroom was at the end of a long hallway that you can see straight across the house into his kitchen. As we leave his room and take a few steps towards the kitchen, the house only being illuminated by moonlight, we stopped dead in our tracks as we noticed two people standing and staring at us from his kitchen. It was us, only it wasn't us. We were totally transparent. There we stood for a good 10 seconds staring at ghost versions of ourselves, their eyes piercing deep into my soul, the feeling of which I cannot even describe. Then suddenly the intense stare-off was broken by when these two doppelgangers start slowly walking towards us. I make a break back into his bedroom and then my cousin darts into his parents' room. I hid as best I could under his bed for what seemed like an eternity, trying to control my heavy breathing down to a silence, when I see two sets of feet walk into his room, stop at the bed for a few seconds and then walk back out. I was so scared that I fell asleep after a few hours still under his bed. After waking up in the morning, still under the bed, I look around for my cousin whom I found sleeping in his parents' bed. We talked about it in the morning and both our stories matched up with what I saw. His parents never believed us, but years later I brought it up to him at a family gathering and he still remembers it exactly the same. I never really tell anyone this story in person cause it still terrifies me to this day.